The ambulance doors slammed shut just as the luxury SUV screeched to a stop. A wealthy businesswoman stumbled onto the rain-soaked sidewalk, staring at the rideshare driver who had refused to take her only minutes earlier. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't apologizing. He was kneeling beside a young woman lying unconscious on the pavement, pressing his jacket against a wound on her shoulder while calmly directing terrified strangers. A billionaire's daughter discovers the driver who cancelled her ride, risking everything to save a complete stranger. What happens next changes both of their lives forever. Marcus Bennett had learned long ago that life rarely gave warnings. It simply changed directions without asking permission. Every morning at 5:30, before most of Chicago even considered waking up, Marcus slipped quietly from the tiny apartment he shared with his younger sister, Ava. The apartment was barely 600 square feet. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The heating failed every winter. And the elevator hadn't worked in nearly 3 years. But Marcus never complained. Complaining didn't pay rent. Complaining didn't buy Ava's asthma medication. Complaining certainly didn't erase the medical debt left behind after their mother lost her battle with cancer 2 years earlier. Instead, Marcus worked. He drove for 2 rideshare apps during the day. Delivered food in the evenings. And every weekend, he volunteered at a community first aid clinic where retired paramedics taught emergency response classes. Most people never understood why. "You already work 70 hours a week," Ava often told him. Because one day, Marcus always answered with a smile, "Someone's worst day might become my responsibility." Their father had been a firefighter. Marcus barely remembered him. Only stories. Stories about a man who believed no stranger should ever suffer alone. His father had died pulling 2 children from a burning apartment building. People called him a hero. Marcus simply called him Dad. Those stories stayed with him. Whenever another driver ignored someone stranded on the roadside. Whenever people crossed the street to avoid someone sleeping on a bench. Whenever the world seemed too busy to notice pain. Marcus remembered. Kindness wasn't something you scheduled. It was something you chose. Every single day. At 7:15 that Tuesday morning, he stopped outside a small bakery. Not for himself. For Mr. Hernandez. An elderly widower who swept the sidewalks before local businesses opened. Marcus handed him a hot coffee. "The usual," the old man smiled. Marcus nodded. "And don't argue. I was going to pay you back Friday." "You've been saying that since February." Mr. Hernandez laughed. "You'll never be rich giving everything away." Marcus grinned. Maybe being rich isn't the point. Across the street, a little girl struggled to carry groceries nearly half her size. Marcus jogged over. "Need a hand?" Her mother looked embarrassed. "You don't have to." "I know." He carried the bags up 3 flights of stairs before returning to his car. His rideshare app had already warned him twice. "You're delaying active requests." Lower acceptance rates meant fewer bonuses. But Marcus ignored it. Some things mattered more than algorithms. Around noon, business picked up. Airport runs. Office workers. Tourists. 5-star ratings filled his screen. Passengers often commented on how unusually calm he was. One executive even asked if he'd ever considered becoming a private chauffeur. Marcus laughed. "I like meeting ordinary people. You'd make 3 times as much." "Maybe. But money isn't everything." The executive shook his head as if Marcus had spoken another language. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered over downtown Chicago. Rain hammered the windshield. Traffic slowed to a crawl. His phone buzzed. Premium ride request. Estimated fare, $147. Pickup location. The Harrison Financial Tower. Marcus smiled. One trip like this could cover groceries for the week. He accepted immediately. 8 minutes later, he pulled beneath the gleaming glass entrance. Employees rushed through revolving doors holding expensive umbrellas. Then she appeared. Elegant. Confident. Late 20s. Tailored navy coat. Designer handbag. Phone pressed against her ear. Olivia Harrison. Though Marcus had no idea who she was. She climbed toward the vehicle without even looking up. "I'm on my way," she told whoever was on the phone. "We can't let the investors leave before I." Then Marcus heard it. Not her voice. Another sound. A scream. Sharp. Desperate. Across the intersection. His eyes snapped toward the crosswalk. A cyclist had collided with a delivery truck. People froze. Cars kept moving. No one ran. Olivia reached for the rear door. "Hurry," she said impatiently. "I'm already behind schedule." Marcus never answered. His father's words echoed inside his mind. Someone's worst day might become your responsibility. Without another thought, he cancelled the ride. Jumped from the driver's seat. And sprinted straight into the pouring rain. Behind him came an angry voice. "What are you doing?" But Marcus never looked back. Someone needed him more. And he had already made his choice. Before we continue with this incredible journey, I spent countless hours researching and crafting this story to bring you something truly meaningful. If stories like this touch your heart and you want to see more acts of kindness that restore faith in humanity, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. It means the world to me and helps these important stories reach others who need to hear them. Now, let's see what happens next. Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that completely changed your perspective? Share your story in the comments below. Marcus reached the injured cyclist just seconds before anyone else. Rain poured relentlessly onto the street, mixing with shattered glass and the bright yellow paint of the bicycle lane. The young woman lay on her side, barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Blood seeped steadily from a deep cut on her shoulder where she had struck the edge of the truck. A small crowd gathered. Phones appeared. Someone whispered, "Call 911." Another person simply stared. Marcus dropped to his knees. "Everyone, please give her some space." His calm voice cut through the panic. "You, in the blue jacket, yes, you. Please call an ambulance and tell them there's significant bleeding. Tell them we're at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Adams." The man nodded and immediately dialed. Marcus removed his own jacket, folded it carefully, and pressed it firmly against the wound. "It's okay," he said softly to the injured woman. "Stay with me. My name is Marcus. Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. I can't. I know. Don't try to move. Help is coming." He checked her pulse. Fast. Weak. He quickly examined her arms and legs without moving her body, making sure there were no obvious spinal injuries before continuing to keep pressure on the wound. "Just breathe with me." He inhaled slowly. She tried to match him. The crowd began to settle. Panic gave way to purpose. One woman held an umbrella over them. Another handed Marcus a clean towel from her shopping bag. The truck driver stood trembling nearby. "I didn't see her. I swear I didn't see her." Marcus looked up. "This isn't the time to blame yourself. Stay here. The police will need your statement." The driver's breathing slowed. Sometimes people didn't need answers. They needed someone to remain calm. Across the street, Olivia Harrison stood frozen beneath the awning of her office building. Her expensive shoes were soaked. Her phone still rested against her ear. She hadn't spoken for nearly a minute. The investors. The meeting. Everything she'd considered urgent moments earlier suddenly seemed insignificant. Her assistant's voice echoed through the phone. "Olivia? Olivia? Are you still there? She quietly ended the call. Without another word, she crossed the street. The rain soaked her perfectly tailored coat within seconds. She stopped a few feet behind Marcus. You canceled my ride. He didn't even turn around. I'm sorry. His eyes remained on the injured woman. I'll accept whatever penalty the company gives me. Olivia frowned. You're apologizing. I know I cost you time. She stared at him in disbelief. You're saving someone's life. Marcus simply replied, I'm trying. The ambulance sirens grew louder. Paramedics rushed toward them with stretchers and medical equipment. One of them immediately recognized Marcus. Bennett? Marcus smiled faintly. Morning, Steve. The older paramedic blinked. You again. Steve examined the injured woman before nodding with approval. Pressure placement is perfect. He looked toward his partner. If he hadn't acted this quickly, she would have lost a dangerous amount of blood. Marcus slowly stepped back as the professionals took over. The young woman weakly reached for his hand before they lifted her. Thank you. Marcus squeezed her fingers gently. You're going to be okay. The ambulance doors closed. The sirens faded into the distance. Only then did Marcus realize he was completely drenched. His jacket was ruined. His hands shook slightly from the adrenaline. Olivia approached him carefully. I've seen people donate money. She paused. I've seen people post inspirational quotes online. She looked at the blood staining his sleeves. But I've never seen someone walk away from nearly $150 without thinking twice. Marcus shrugged. It wasn't really a decision. It wasn't. He shook his head. If someone needs help, you help. It's that simple. It should be. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had answered a question without trying to impress her. No speeches. No performance. Just honesty. A notification sounded on Marcus's phone. Ride cancelled. Driver acceptance rate reduced. Bonus eligibility lost. He glanced at the screen for barely a second before slipping the phone back into his pocket. Olivia noticed. You lost money because of me. Marcus smiled. No. He looked toward the ambulance disappearing into traffic. I lost money because someone else needed time. For reasons she couldn't explain, that sentence settled deeply in Olivia's heart. She extended her hand. I'm Olivia. He wiped his wet hand on his jeans before shaking hers. Marcus. Can I ask you something? Sure. Where did you learn to do all that? My dad was a firefighter. I'm sorry. He passed away when I was little. And the medical training? I volunteer at a community clinic on weekends. She looked genuinely surprised. You volunteer? He laughed softly. My sister says I should spend my weekends sleeping instead. You work during the week too? I drive. Only rideshare. And food delivery. And still volunteer. Marcus nodded. There are always people who need help. Olivia found herself asking a question she rarely asked anyone. Why? He looked at the gray sky. When my mom was sick, strangers showed us kindness. He smiled at the memory. A neighbor paid 1 month's rent and never told us it was him. A nurse stayed after her shift just to keep my mother company. A grocery cashier quietly paid for medicine we couldn't afford. He swallowed. I never found most of those people. So I guess. He looked back at Olivia. I'm just trying to return a debt I can never repay. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The city noise returned around them. Car horns. Footsteps. Rain. Life continued. But something had changed. Olivia's driver from the office had finally arrived. A black luxury sedan pulled up beside the curb. The chauffeur stepped out. "Miss Harrison, everyone's waiting." She nodded but didn't move. Instead, she turned back to Marcus. "You still haven't had lunch, have you?" He smiled sheepishly. "I usually eat between rides." She glanced at her watch. "My meeting can wait another 30 minutes. He immediately shook his head. "No, really. You should go." She smiled for the first time. "I wasn't asking." 20 minutes later, they sat inside a small family-owned diner a few blocks away. It wasn't the kind of restaurant Olivia normally visited. The booths were worn. The coffee was served in mismatched mugs. The waitress greeted Marcus by name. "The usual." He laughed. "You know me too well." Olivia noticed something remarkable. Every employee smiled when Marcus walked in. Not because he was wealthy. Not because he was famous. Because he treated them like friends. When the meals arrived, Marcus quietly asked the waitress to add an extra sandwich and soup to his bill. Olivia looked confused. "We ordered everything already." Marcus glanced toward the window. An elderly man sat outside under a bus shelter, trying to stay warm despite the rain. "He'll probably be hungry." The waitress nodded knowingly. "I'll take it over." Olivia watched silently. "You do this often?" Marcus shrugged. "When I can." She looked down at her untouched coffee. For years, she'd believed generosity came from having abundance. Sitting across from Marcus, she realized true generosity often came from having very little, and choosing to share it anyway. She had boarded his car believing she was the one with something valuable to offer the world. Now she wasn't so sure. For the first time in a very long time, Olivia Harrison felt that she had just met someone far richer than herself. The lunch they shared should have been the end of the story. A cancelled ride. A rescued stranger. A meal between two people whose lives should never have crossed again. But life has a remarkable way of bringing the right people back together when there's still something they need to learn from each other. 3 days later, Marcus was making his final food delivery before heading home when his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, this is Marcus." "Hi, this is Olivia." He smiled. "The investor meeting survivor." She laughed. "I deserved that. I hope everything worked out." It did. There was a brief pause. "I actually wasn't calling about work." Marcus waited. "The young woman you helped, her name is Rachel." His face lit up. "Is she okay?" "She is. I visited her at the hospital yesterday." Marcus let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That's wonderful." "She asked about you." "Me?" "She wanted to thank the man who saved her life." Marcus looked out his windshield at the evening traffic. "I didn't save her." "You'll never take credit for anything, will you?" He smiled. "I was just there." "The doctors disagree." Another pause. "Rachel is being discharged tomorrow. I thought you might want to meet her." Marcus agreed. The next afternoon, he arrived at the hospital wearing his only button-down shirt. It had been ironed so many times that the fabric had begun to thin at the elbows. He carried a small bouquet of daisies he had bought from a street vendor. Not roses. Not lilies. Just simple daisies. "They're cheerful," he had told the vendor. Rachel sat by the hospital window, her shoulder wrapped in a sling. She couldn't stop smiling when Marcus walked in. "You came." "Of course." She wiped tears from her eyes. "I don't even remember everything that happened." "You don't have to. They told me." Her voice cracked. "They told me that if you'd waited another 5 minutes." Marcus gently interrupted. "But I didn't." She stood carefully and hugged him with her good arm. "Thank you." Olivia quietly stepped into the hallway, giving them a moment alone. When Marcus finally emerged, she was waiting beside the vending machines. "I've been thinking about something." He looked at her. "You volunteer every weekend?" "Yes." "You work almost every day?" "Most weeks." "You barely sleep." He laughed. "My sister says the same thing." "What if you didn't have to drive so much?" Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" "My foundation sponsors community programs." "You have a foundation?" She smiled. "My grandfather started it. I sit on the board. We're expanding our emergency response education initiative." Marcus listened politely, unsure where the conversation was going. "I'd like to hire you." He blinked. "Hire me?" "To teach first aid workshops across the city." Marcus almost laughed. "I don't have the qualifications." "You've been teaching volunteers for years." "I'm not a professional." "You became one the moment you acted when everyone else froze." He shook his head. "I appreciate it, really. But I can't." "Why not?" "I need steady income. This position pays more than rideshare driving." Marcus stared at her. "How much more?" She mentioned the salary. He nearly dropped the coffee cup he was holding. "That's enough to work reasonable hours. Enough to help your sister. Enough to keep doing what you're already passionate about." For a moment, Marcus imagined saying yes. Weekends free. Evenings with Ava. No more 12-hour driving shifts. But then reality returned. "I can't leave immediately." Olivia looked confused. "I help care for Mr. Hernandez." "The elderly man from the bakery?" Marcus nodded. "And Mrs. Collins downstairs. And the Johnson family's groceries every Wednesday. And Coach Lewis at the youth center." Olivia blinked. "You have scheduled kindness?" Marcus laughed. "I guess you could call it that. They depend on me." "You've built your whole week around helping people." He shrugged. "They helped me first." Olivia realized something astonishing. Marcus had quietly become the invisible thread holding together dozens of lives. Most of those people probably had no idea how much they relied on him. That evening, Marcus shared the news with Ava. She nearly screamed. "You have to take it." "I don't know." "Marcus. What if I'm not good enough?" She stared at him in disbelief. "You literally saved someone's life. That's different." "How?" "I knew what to do. And you'll know what to teach." He looked uncertain. "What if people expect too much?" Ava smiled sadly. "You've spent your whole life worrying about disappointing people." She reached across the kitchen table. "You know what Mom always used to say?" Marcus nodded before she could answer. "You don't have to change the whole world. Just change the world that's standing in front of you." Exactly. But not everyone celebrated. News of Marcus's rescue had spread online after several witnesses posted videos. One clip showed him kneeling beside Rachel. Another captured the paramedic praising his quick actions. The videos accumulated millions of views. Most comments praised him. Some questioned him. One anonymous post read, "Probably staged for attention." Another claimed, "He's just trying to get donations." Marcus tried to ignore them. But words have weight. Especially when they attack the sincerity of someone who has never sought recognition. A week later, a rideshare passenger recognized him. "So you're the hero guy." Marcus smiled awkwardly. "I just helped." The passenger smirked. Funny how these stories always show up when someone's trying to become famous. Marcus didn't answer. The silence during the rest of the trip felt much longer than 15 minutes. That night, he almost declined Olivia's job offer. Maybe the critics were right. Maybe people would think he was accepting the position because of publicity. Maybe everything good that had happened was built on a misunderstanding. The next morning, Olivia visited the community clinic where Marcus volunteered. She found him quietly restocking first aid kits. "You've been avoiding my calls." He sighed. "I don't want people thinking this job is charity. It isn't. They'll say you only hired me because of what happened." She folded her arms. "Marcus." He looked up. "I didn't offer you this job because you saved Rachel. You didn't. I offered it because saving Rachel revealed what you've been doing your entire life." She stepped closer. "One extraordinary moment didn't make you extraordinary. It simply allowed the rest of us to notice." Marcus looked down at the unopened medical supplies in his hands. For years, he had measured his worth by how quietly he could help others. Now the attention frightened him. "What if I fail?" Olivia smiled warmly. "The people you've already helped don't remember whether you were perfect. They remember that you showed up." Her words stayed with him long after she left. For the first time since the videos went viral, Marcus began to wonder if accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness. Maybe. Just maybe. It was the next act of courage his life was asking him to make. Marcus didn't give Olivia an answer right away. For nearly 2 weeks, the offer sat unanswered. Every morning, he woke before dawn. Every day, he drove passengers across Chicago. Every evening, he delivered meals, checked on elderly neighbors, and helped Ava manage her asthma treatments. And every night, he stared at the business card Olivia had left on the kitchen table. Ava finally grew tired of waiting. One evening, she marched into the living room and placed the card directly in front of him. "Call her." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Ava." "No." She folded her arms. "You tell everyone else to believe in themselves. That's different." "It isn't." He sighed. "What if this changes everything?" She smiled. "That's exactly the point." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus picked up the phone. 3 days later, he stood nervously in front of a classroom filled with 25 volunteers. The community center smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. Bandages, CPR dummies, and first aid kits were arranged neatly across the tables. Olivia sat quietly in the back row, observing. Marcus swallowed hard. His hands felt strangely shaky. Saving a stranger had been easier than public speaking. "Good morning, everyone." The room fell silent. "My name is Marcus Bennett." A few people immediately recognized him from the viral videos. He noticed their expressions. The whispers. The curiosity. For a brief second, doubt returned. Then he remembered Rachel. He remembered his father. He remembered every person who had once shown kindness to his family. And he began. Within minutes, something remarkable happened. The nervousness disappeared. The room leaned forward. People listened. Not because Marcus spoke like a professional lecturer. But because he spoke from experience. Every lesson carried a story. Every technique carried purpose. Every instruction carried genuine care. By the end of the session, nobody wanted to leave. One volunteer approached him. "I've attended dozens of training programs. This was the first one that made me believe I could actually save someone's life." Another added, "You make ordinary people feel capable." Marcus smiled. Maybe Ava had been right. Maybe this was exactly where he belonged. Over the next several months, the program expanded rapidly. Community centers. Schools. Churches. Libraries. Workplaces. Marcus traveled throughout the city teaching thousands of people basic emergency response skills. More volunteers joined. Then more. Soon, neighborhoods that previously had no emergency preparedness programs began forming local response teams. People who had never met each other started working together. The ripple effect grew larger than anyone expected. And Olivia never stopped supporting the mission. Whenever funding ran short, she found solutions. Whenever obstacles appeared, she removed barriers. When city permits delayed new programs, she spent hours making calls. When volunteers needed equipment, she secured donations. She wasn't simply helping Marcus anymore. She had become deeply invested in the movement itself. One afternoon, after a successful workshop, Marcus found her stacking chairs. "You know you don't have to do that." She laughed. "And miss all the fun?" He shook his head. "You've changed." She looked surprised. "So have you." Marcus thought about that. She was right. The woman who once measured success through quarterly reports and investor meetings now spent weekends helping community projects. The man who once doubted his own worth now stood confidently before hundreds of people. Kindness had transformed both of them. Then came the moment neither of them expected. Nearly a year after the accident, Rachel invited them to a special event. When they arrived, they found themselves standing outside a newly renovated community center. A large banner hung across the entrance. Marcus froze when he read the words. The Bennett Community Response Center. His eyes widened. "No." Rachel smiled through tears. "Yes." Marcus looked around in disbelief. "What is this?" Rachel stepped forward. "The day you saved my life changed everything." She paused. "I was working 2 jobs and studying nursing. The accident nearly ended that dream." Her voice trembled. "But because you acted, I got another chance." She pointed toward the building. "I graduated 6 months ago." The crowd erupted into applause. Marcus stared at her. "You're a nurse." She nodded proudly. "And now I want to help others the way you helped me." The center would provide free first aid training, health education, emergency preparedness classes, and support services for underserved neighborhoods. Dozens of local businesses had contributed. Hundreds of volunteers had donated time. The city had provided support. An entire community had come together. All because one person chose not to look away. Marcus could barely speak. His eyes filled with tears. "This isn't because of me." Rachel smiled. "It started because of you." As the ribbon-cutting ceremony began, Marcus noticed a familiar figure standing near the back. Mr. Hernandez. The elderly widower from the bakery. Marcus walked over and embraced him. The old man laughed. "Look at you. I'm still the same person." "No." Mr. Hernandez shook his head. "You're not." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man pointed toward the crowd. "Years ago, you brought me coffee when nobody noticed I existed. You helped people one at a time." He gestured toward the hundreds gathered outside the center. "Now you've taught an entire city to do the same." Marcus looked around. Students. Parents. Firefighters. Teachers. Nurses. Volunteers. Neighbors. People from every background imaginable. All connected by one simple belief. Someone else's life mattered. As the celebration continued, Marcus found himself standing beside Olivia once again. Much like the day they first met. Only everything had changed. He looked at her. "You know something?" "What?" "If I hadn't cancelled that ride." She smiled. "You would have made $147. They both laughed. Then Marcus shook his head. "No. I would have missed all of this." Olivia followed his gaze toward the crowd. Toward Rachel. Toward Ava. Toward the volunteers. Toward the future. Funny how life works. Marcus nodded. The things we think are interruptions sometimes become the reason we're here. A few months later, another rainy afternoon arrived in Chicago. Marcus was leaving a workshop when he noticed a young teenager kneeling beside an injured pedestrian. The boy remained calm. Someone called emergency services. Others rushed to help. Everything happened efficiently. Confidently. Compassionately. Marcus recognized the first aid techniques immediately. The teenager had attended one of his classes. The boy looked up. Their eyes met. Marcus smiled. The teenager smiled back. And in that moment, Marcus understood something beautiful. The greatest reward wasn't the recognition. Or the career. Or even the community center. It was knowing that kindness no longer depended on him alone. It had spread. It had multiplied. And now it lived in people he might never even meet. This story shows how one act of kindness can change everything. What's one way you could make a difference in someone's life today? Challenge yourself and share your commitment in the comments. Months turned into years. The Bennett Community Response Center became one of the busiest places in Chicago. What had started as a single training program grew into a citywide movement. Every week, families, students, teachers, restaurant workers, security guards, delivery drivers, and retirees filled its classrooms. Some came because they had witnessed an emergency and felt helpless. Others came simply because they wanted to be ready if someone ever needed them. No one was turned away. If someone couldn't afford the training, it was free. If someone needed transportation, volunteers arranged it. If someone spoke little English, bilingual instructors stepped in without hesitation. Marcus insisted on one rule that every instructor memorized. We don't teach heroes here. People often looked confused. Then he would smile. We teach neighbors. Because in Marcus's eyes, heroism wasn't about extraordinary courage. It was about ordinary people refusing to walk away. That simple philosophy spread far beyond the walls of the center. Within 3 years, thousands of residents had completed emergency response training. Several lives had already been saved by former students. Each success story reminded Marcus of something his father had believed long before he was born. Kindness multiplies when it's shared. Ava's life transformed as well. With Marcus no longer working endless overnight shifts, she finally had the stability she needed. She completed nursing school with honors. The day she graduated, Marcus sat in the front row wearing the same suit he had bought for Rachel's hospital visit years earlier. It fit a little tighter now. The sleeves were slightly worn. But he refused to replace it. It reminded him where everything had begun. When Ava's name was called, she spotted Marcus in the crowd. She didn't wave. She simply placed her hand over her heart. It was the same silent gesture their mother used whenever words weren't enough. After the ceremony, Ava hugged her brother so tightly that neither of them noticed the photographers nearby. You kept your promise, she whispered through tears. Marcus looked puzzled. What promise? When Mom was dying. His eyes widened. You told her you'd make sure I had every opportunity she never got. Marcus swallowed hard. I just did what any brother would do. No. Ava smiled. You did what only you would do. Rachel also kept her promise. She became one of the center's lead instructors while continuing her work as an emergency room nurse. Every new class heard the same story. Not to celebrate Marcus, but to remind them that knowledge means very little unless it is matched by compassion. She would often hold up an old photograph of the damaged bicycle. This accident almost became the last day of my life. The room always fell silent. Instead, she would continue, it became the first day of my purpose. Several students later admitted that those words inspired them to volunteer in their own communities. The ripple continued. As for Olivia Harrison, success began to mean something entirely different. Her company continued to grow. The investor meeting still happened. The business headlines still praised her leadership. But the achievement she treasured most never appeared in financial magazines. She quietly expanded the Harrison Foundation's community initiatives into cities across the country. More training centers opened. More scholarships were created. More partnerships formed with hospitals, schools, and neighborhood organizations. Whenever journalists asked what inspired the change, Olivia always smiled. It started with a canceled ride. Most reporters assumed it was a metaphor. She never corrected them. Some stories are too personal to explain. One chilly autumn morning, Marcus climbed into his car after finishing an early workshop. He still drove occasionally. Not because he needed the money. Because he genuinely enjoyed meeting people. As he waited at a red light, a notification appeared. New ride request. He accepted. Minutes later, he pulled up outside a modest apartment building. A nervous young man climbed into the back seat carrying a folder labeled job interview. Marcus smiled through the rearview mirror. Big day. The young man nodded anxiously. I haven't worked in almost a year. I really need this. Halfway there, traffic came to a complete stop. Up ahead, a small crowd gathered around an elderly woman who had collapsed on the sidewalk. Marcus looked at the young passenger. The young man looked back. Without saying a word, they both opened their doors. They ran together. Before Marcus could kneel, the young man was already checking the woman's breathing exactly as he had been taught. You've done this before? Marcus asked. The young man nodded. I took one of your classes 6 months ago. Marcus smiled. Together, they cared for the woman until paramedics arrived. As the ambulance pulled away, the young man looked at his watch in horror. My interview. Marcus reached into his pocket and handed him a business card. Take this. What is it? A friend of mine owns a logistics company. If today's interview doesn't work out, tell her I sent you. The young man's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Marcus shook his head. You already did. The young man looked confused. Marcus smiled. You stopped. That evening, Marcus walked home through the same neighborhood where his journey had begun. The leaking apartment building had been renovated. Children played safely in the courtyard. Mr. Hernandez still swept the sidewalk every morning, though now several teenagers insisted on helping him. Mrs. Collins no longer carried her groceries alone. Neighbors checked on one another without being asked. Kindness had become part of the neighborhood's identity. Marcus paused outside the old bakery. The owner handed him a familiar cup of coffee. No charge. Marcus laughed. You always say that. And you always try to argue. They both smiled. Some traditions were worth keeping. Marcus looked up as the first drops of rain began to fall. For a brief moment, he remembered the afternoon that had changed everything. One cancelled ride. One decision. One stranger. If he had worried about ratings. If he had chased the fare. If he had convinced himself that someone else would help. None of this would have happened. He wasn't special. He had simply made a choice. And that choice had inspired thousands of others to make the same one. Maybe that's how the world changes. Not through one extraordinary person. But through ordinary people choosing compassion when it's inconvenient. Choosing courage when it's uncomfortable. Choosing kindness when no one is watching. Because every person we meet is fighting a battle we cannot see. Every stranger carries a story. And every small act of kindness has the potential to echo through generations. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary kindness exists all around us. If this touched your heart, please like this video, it helps more people discover these inspiring stories. Subscribe for more tales of human kindness that will restore your faith in humanity. And most importantly, look for opportunities in your own life to be someone's unexpected blessing. What act of kindness will you perform this week? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and remember, you have the power to change someone's entire world.